Today we're going to explore an alternative use of Weaponiser, one that I use a lot myself, which is using Weaponiser as a tool for creating custom sample packs. If you're a musician or a sound designer, creating custom sample packs is first of all a way to have your own palette of unique sounds that you, and only you, can use in your own productions, but potentially even a way of creating an extra income stream, which is so important in building a sustainable career. The first pack that we're going to create are some magical sounding whooshes. Let's have a look at them. So here I have recorded a few sounds, a cymbal being scraped, and we have different variations of it. And then I have two different recordings of waterphone that I just did. One is long without water, and one is another long articulation but with some water in it. If you don't know what a waterphone is, look it up, it's really cool. So now we're going to do some really fast editing of these assets, and we're going to import them in Weaponiser. So here I'm in Nuendo, so this will obviously be different depending on the DAW that you're using. In Nuendo I'm just going to cut this very quickly. Don't even need to be too precise because I can then fine-tune the results in Weaponiser. There you go, something like that should work. Then what we can do is to get rid of these empty regions over here. We don't even need to do that, but it's nicer and cleaner if we do. And then we can select them all, and I like to do a tiny fade in and fade out. Then I can have them all selected, go to File, Export, Selected Events, and we have 11 nice assets. So if I now bring the folder in, here I have all my assets nicely created. So now let's open Weaponiser. And what I want to do is create a clean start, which has no samples loaded in, and so I can make my own preset. So now the idea is that we could use the different engines for different parts of the sound. So the cool thing about Weaponiser is that if you drag and drop multiple samples in one single bank, it automatically plays them back in a randomic way, in a randomized way. So I'm going to import 5 of my swish cymbals in bank 1 of the onset engine, and now I have all my samples over here. And so you already can tell that if I fire the button different times, every time that I do that, it's triggering a different sound, which is pretty cool. And I'm gonna do similar things for the waterphones with no water on the body, and waterphones with water on the thumb. So if I trigger them all together, I get something like this. So if I increase the scale a little bit, I can clearly tell that the swish and the waterphone long are sort of a similar length, but you see that the thumb, which is this red one, and the waterphone long with water happens slightly later. So I want to do something like this so that they're more aligned and we can hear them as really layered together. And then the waterphone no water is actually the longest, and I actually want to increase this. I want it to happen actually after the swish and the waterphone long with water hit. So let's try it now. I got this very long tail, which is very interesting. Then another really cool thing that you have in Weaponiser that I use a lot is the synth layer. So each engine has a different synth layer that you can layer up. Let's try the first one. This one is as a carrier and a modulator. Let's hear how it sounds. Let's increase the gain a little bit so we can actually tell what it's doing. Pretty cool. Let's increase the duration a little bit, decrease the gain. This is the envelope of the pitch. I want it to go up a bit more slowly, more gradually. I want it longer. I want it maybe to last for the entire duration of the thing. That's cool, but let's decrease the gain even a bit more so that it's more sort of an accompanying layer to the whole thing. That's really cool. We haven't used the tail at all. We don't have anything in there, but one thing that we can add is a reverb with an impulse response, which we definitely need over here. Let's try the default one. Which is already pretty cool. Let's increase the pre-delay a little bit. Very nice. Then if you want as a final touch, we can add some effects. I always like some ring modulation for this kind of stuff. See how it sounds. I'm actually liking this a lot. So now let's start thinking about exporting all these samples as a sample pack. And we already have some level of randomization as we discussed, because all these samples are being triggered alternatively in a round robins sort of fashion, if you're familiar with the sampling workflow. But we can create even more variation, and we can randomize the speed a little bit, which also means the pitch in a way, because slower speeds corresponds to a lower pitch. We can do the same over here and over here. And maybe just for the last one, which is a bit loud, we can decrease the level a little bit and randomize the level. So now every time I fire it, I get different lengths, which is really cool. Now let's render those. Rendering them is incredibly easy. All I need to do is to put a bunch of regions here. So now the only thing that I need to be careful with is that this is a pretty long sound, and I want to capture it all. So let's make sure these regions don't cut off before the sound is actually over. Let it ring. So there's plenty of time, so we can actually cut this part over. And I can just duplicate these a bunch of times, so they can get, say, 5 or 6 different variations. So now you can use exactly the workflow that we did before. You can export selected events, but actually like being a little bit more fancy about this, because I want to put some more precise name. So I can add a marker track. I can call it naming, and you have it. So I have a few shortcuts that I set up here to set up cycle markers. Obviously, this again a bit dependent on the DAW that you're using. So I have all the markers over here. I can name them, and now I can go on export audio mix down, and then I can go on multiple cycle markers, and I can select them all. And then here in the naming, I can decide to put the cycle marker name as an attribute. Then I can click on OK, and I can export it in the project mixdown folder. Export audio, and it's doing it. It's done. And over here I have my mixdown folder with the magic SFX that we just created. We can import them in so you can have a look in different tracks. And here you have them, all different variations of the same sound. And by the way, this is exactly the same workflow that you would use if you were, for example, preparing assets for a video game, so that you have different variations, and then you can trigger them separately and alternatively in your video game engine. If this is fun, let's try with a couple of extra examples. Let's go back to Weaponiser, and now let's try and create some trailer booms. And here's another thing that I want to show you. I have a couple of samples of a sub boom that I created. Here it is. This is the tail, and I also have a dry version of the same sample. Okay, and I only have one sample each. So how can we create some variation out of just one sample? Let's find out. Go on Weaponiser. I'm going to use the onset for the dry sample, and then I'm going to use the tail for the, well, tail for the reverbed sound. And here again, if I have only one sound and I want to create a bit of variation, I can just randomize a little bit the speed and the levels of each sample. Now let's have a listen. You hear how every time is a little bit different. I want to put some saturation on the dry one. Let's do a bit of high cut so it sounds really dark and sort of like a very subtle boom. It's really used as in Act 1 of trailers. Okay, now this is really cool. I can use exactly the same markers as before. I can do exactly the same thing. Let's just change the name of the markers. So I'm going to put boom 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I can go again into export, and I already have it set up. Again, just click on export audio. And there you go, another sample pack made in 5 minutes. Obviously, not all the sounds coming out of this process will be masterpieces and will actually end up in your sample pack. But the idea here is to show you how easy it is to come up with lots of different variations that you can then select. I really hope this was useful and inspire you to make your own sample pack with Weaponiser. You can find out more about Weaponiser at krotosaudio.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.